hope the technology will allow it. And I want to thank you, Dr. Shalmon, for your time. I know you're very busy. I know that there's a lot of interest around the world, and a lot of people and countries are in direct contact with you. So I leave the floor to you, and afterwards we'll start the Q&A.
Good afternoon, everybody. As I was presented, my name is Ashi Salmon. I'm a clinical oncologist in my background, and during the last 10 years or so, I'm mostly into health administration. I'm coming from the hospital world. I was the deputy director of Barzilai Medical Center, and later the deputy director general of Hadassah University Medical Center, and I'm now running the international affairs of the Ministry of Health. During the COVID-19, which was a tough, I would say challenging, but still extremely interesting year, well, we are now already a year into it, I have to say that I learned a lot about myself, my surrounding, my country, and quite a lot about the world as well. And I think none of us are going to be back the same individuals that we were before the COVID-19, for good and bad. A lot to be said about it, and I guess that maybe should be left for another webinar or a press conference sometime else. Anyhow, I would focus into the story of the vaccination in Israel. I would say a few words in general about our health system, and I would touch in a few sentences what was happening with Israel regarding COVID-19, at least from our previous meeting till now as well. And I would then describe a bit in details what is happening now as part of our vaccine operation. So as you know, Israel is a tiny country. It is just above 22,000 square kilometers. We are, I'm not sure this is the one I'm looking for. We are a young country. Our fertility rate is the highest at OECD, it's 3.1. We have a very, I would say, we have a nice life expectancy rate, but still the portion of the elderly population above 65 is low, it's just above 11%. Due to the young generation that we have here. We have a universal health coverage system, which was in many senses established with the state of Israel, but got the current structure by the Israeli National Health Law from 1994, where we have 4 HMOs which are providing services to the whole population of Israel, including even temporary residents. You must be a member in one of these 4 HMOs, and you're entitled to switch twice a year between these HMOs. We had a very high level of pediatric vaccine compliance before, although we do also experience not an easy challenge with anti-vax movement here as like everywhere else. If we would talk about what was happening in Israel regarding Corona, before I would touch these issues of vaccines. So Israel had its first patient at the end of February 2020. Now we started to prepare ourselves already from mid-January as we got the first information from China, from Wuhan. And at that point, we started to train our hospitals and to write guidelines. And at that point, none of us knew anything of what's going to happen and if at all it would happen, but we are starting to prepare at that time. We were the first country to close the sky to China and to the Far East. We also closed quite quickly our skies to West Europe and the US, unfortunately 5 days much too late. And we did receive, I would say, a massive amount of patients, mostly from New York, but also from London and Paris. Taking that in account, we had peaked during the first wave at the end of March. We went into, I would say, a tough closure, national closure, which we were out or started to fade out sometime at the end of April and went quickly back to normal life. That was too quick, and immediately at I would say even the last day of May, we already saw the new cases coming in, which started to accumulate till September. And after opening the academic year at the beginning of September, we did see again high peaks of new cases a day, which led us to our second closure, which became a tough closure at the first week of October. And after that, we were somehow drifting a bit slowly out of this closure, just to evident what is happening now that we, during last week and the beginning of this week, started to see a record number. And we are now for almost a week into our third national closure, which would last anything between 2 to 3 weeks. And at that time, it's a challenging time because we are already into a massive vaccination program running at the same time of having a national closure. So that's where we are. Totally in numbers, we are aiming the 500,000 total number of patients for 9.2 million citizens or residents. We have a mortality, a number of mortality cases of 3,600 or so, not too bad, but still much higher than we would like to anticipate in the beginning of the whole event. Now, we started to investigate the field of vaccines quite early. I think in April, we had our first initial calls with AstraZeneca. And after, of course, the Jenner Institute of Oxford had published the first publication regarding the adenovirus-based vaccine, we had discussion during the end of the spring and in the summer with Moderna, Actorus, and many other companies. Our first agreement was actually with Moderna, and then with a few others. Pfizer came into a practical line quite late. Only during the months of November, we had finalized our first agreement with Pfizer, but Pfizer at that point was willing to push ahead into Israel a substantial amount of vaccines quite early, by the understanding that we are very much prepared and ready and organized to start vaccinating at the minute that we could have a regulatory permission to start vaccinating. So some key principles for what is happening. Okay, so it was clear that vaccinating as fast as possible to reduce morbidity and mortality here. It was clear for us that we have to properly prioritize the groups of individuals in the country to prioritize our plan of vaccination. We decided to start with medical personnel, but at the same time, to start immediately with vaccinating everybody above the age of 60. Now that was quite a unique decision for us. Many European countries started with older ages, and people in 70 or 75. And in that sense, we decided to start with younger ages, as it seems to us that we need to bring a massive volume into the vaccination centers to create this shift of people understanding that it's the right thing to come and be vaccinated. So we started from the age of 60 for everybody. And we did add a certain amount of first responders to our first course of vaccination, meaning ambulance drivers, policemen, etc. But we had used this subgroup of relatively young people in order to keep flexibility. And I would go into it in a minute again, but in general, we are using these groups as groups. At the end of the day, we always try to find out all over the country how many doses are left and behind and would not be used at the same day. And to avoid or to diminish waste, we do send first responders like ambulance drivers, like paramedics, like police brigade to the stations at the end of the day. And in that way, at least I could tell you that we had vaccinated nearly 90% of all fire brigade personnel in the country just by using this type of standby system. Media work and information was really important. It was clear for us that we have to prepare the ground, convincing the public, not only convincing them that vaccination is important, but rather convincing them that we have enough data to support this operation, that these vaccines are safe, create good, I would say, transparency of everything which is happening, to create good trust. And it was not easy, not for the general population, but even more for some communities in the country, mostly ultra-Orthodox and the Arab Muslim community. I would say a word about it in a minute. And of course, it was clear for us that as a key principle, we have to track side effects in a efficient, centralized electronic system, and that would be part of what I would say in a minute as part of our lessons, having a strong electronic record system that runs the whole operation, no paper and pencil at all. So some challenges, as you know, a Pfizer vaccine should be stored at -80. It is a big challenge for large countries. It's also a challenge for small countries like us. But it was clear that we have to have a proper storage place. And we did make a decision to have one single national storage site, which is at the logistics site of our largest pharmaceutical company, Teva, which had a sufficient amount of Redco -80 freeze. And we could use that site, which is actually in the center of the country near the main roads, as also a logistics center where we would spread and send and ship these samples all over the country on a daily basis. Now, we have to take in account when a solution, a vial is defreezed, we have a short life, a shelf life. We have to finish it in 120 minutes, although we are trying not to pass the 96 hours. Not minutes, sorry, 120 hours, and we are trying not to pass the 96 hours, and it should be held at -2 to -8 degrees. We had limited information regarding the product stability. We know that liposomal-based vaccines like Pfizer and Moderna are very sensitive to vibration and shocks and movement shocks, and that is a big issue, as you could in a very careful way use this type of protected pseudo pizza slice traces to ship the vaccines to the destination, but you can't really reship it again from one destination to another. The issue of unknown demand was a very important issue for us, so we could plan properly our supply. And there was strict regulation requirement, which we went through. In the sake of time, I would not touch it, but we were waiting for the FDA to make their decision of emergency licensing, and we took the information from other sources and used it to quickly license the Pfizer vaccine and then later Moderna here in Israel. So regarding procurement, we have a national centralized procurement scheme which involves multi-ministry and agencies of the State of Israel. And this cooperation seems to be an extremely important issue in success, because every agency or body has its own strengths, and you must know how to use it in a proper way in a centralized system where you could really properly take care of all part of this complicated chain of actions that are needed to be taken. So it was coordinated by us, by the Ministry of Health, and we are doing it through our COVID-19 command center near the airport. And we did start early to deal with issues like needles and syringes, and it was clear that you need to have a sufficient number of them to be successful in this project. So regarding operations and logistics, as I said, we have a centralized control and planning through our control center of the Ministry of Health, one ultra-free central location for the country. And we made a decision to secure a second dose for each first dose distributed. Again, it's a big international debate whether we should keep strictly the protocol of Pfizer and Moderna and vaccinate in the exact a lag between the two doses. And we made a decision, which I could discuss later, to stick to the protocol, and we are doing it that way. Distribution, as I said, needed to have a good weekly planning. We do plan the full next week every weekend, and we do ship to each point 3 times a week a shipment. Now, we have 350 vaccination points all over the country, and I would go in a minute into it. So that's the way it is. We bring in everything to our central supply centers. We ship it on daily basis from there in the very early hours of the morning. Each location would get 3 times a week a supply. We do vaccinate in large common locations like stadiums, sport arenas, shopping malls, where it could be in big towns that each HMO would open its own center, or in small and remote areas where we convince the HMOs to work together and to open a commune vaccination center for the 4 HMOs. Training of the personnel was made mostly by Zoom. First, we had trained the trainers in each HMO, mostly nurses, but also paramedics. And then each HMO had trained its own full personnel, mostly by remote training. Clinics and community centers had vaccinated as well, and hospital. We asked all public hospitals first to vaccinate their own medical personnel, but then also to assist us in our national effort to vaccinate the population. As time moves, we are putting more emphasis into the community and less into hospital. At the same time, we run a project of outreaching our nursery home. We have more than 600 nursing homes in Israel, and the plan was to reach all of them in 1 month and vaccinate both the elderly population living there as well as the caregivers of these institutions. We are now debating how to vaccinate people at long-term care at home, which are disabled and can't be moved or brought to a vaccination center, and we would start vaccinating them as well, although there are many, I would say, obstacles, mostly when we are dealing with Moderna and Pfizer. Lessons learned. So we needed to create smaller cases for distribution. So the standard Pfizer case is for 960 vaccination doses, meaning it's very large and it is suitable for large places. But if we want to send to a remote place where we have to give just 50 or 60 shots, we had to create small kind of a pizza slice trays to use them as to distribute to these areas. It was evident to us and very clear that we had to create a stable and an accurate information system, electronic information system, both to track side effects, to document, and we do document in a way that which is a two-tailed documentation. One, the National Central Registry get the information immediately about every individual which was vaccinated, and at the same time, each patient, each individual would receive to his electronic medical chart a notice that he was vaccinated, and that would immediately create a situation where a text message is sent out to everybody which received a vaccine, telling them, okay, you got your first vaccine, you are welcome to come in 21 days and that time to this and this address and get your second shot as well. And of course, the properly planning of the whole system. So call centers was another thing that we have created, and call centers have 2 main purposes. The first one is to assist the professionals which are vaccinating. So we have a 24/7 call center that you could call and ask whatever you need to ask as a professional, and that first diminish the risk of mistakes and errors and diminish the risk of losing unnecessary doses of vaccines. And we have a call center open for the public, where every concern or question that you have, you could call and ask, mostly about side effects, and that would ease down many issues and would create, I think, a situation of trust and transparency, as well as the ability of people to get answers and sometimes to avoid unnecessary visits to emergency rooms. And never forget syringes and needle supply. They are crucial for this project. We did use a lot of technological tools, both to schedule appointments through, you could schedule appointments through a call center, but you could do it through the internet or through your cellular phone using your HMO app. All HMO app had the option of booking a vaccination session for every individual. It is clear that for the elderly population, these tools are not easy to use, so a call center was widely used. And in some communities also, the HMO itself, the local branch of the HMO, the local medical center would call elderly people and invite them actively to come in. We use these apps also to follow up, to send reminders, text reminders to people that they should show up, and also voice reminders to mostly for the elderly population. And it seems to be a very efficient tool. Targeted media campaign was crucial. So we had a national campaign which was good and efficient. We call it Give a Shoulder, Tnu Katef, where we convince the public that coming early makes sense and you should come as soon as you are entitled to receive a vaccine. But it seems that we have to focus also into certain communities, like some of the ultra-Orthodox communities, where we had to look to other forms of communications and public diplomacy to convince them to come, and as well a massive effort that we are putting into the Arab population, as we have lower numbers of people being vaccinated and with a lower number of compliance to convince this population that they could trust the vaccine and they should come in as soon as possible. So a lot was done about that. And we did also train EMT and paramedics how to administer the vaccine. It is not part of their usual work, so we had somehow quickly to train them. And in that sense, I think we are still holding quite a nice group of people which are involved in the project. So to sum the numbers till now we have vaccinated around 2 million Israelis. Above 100,000 of them already received their second dose. And we are expecting to run ahead, hopefully to be able till the end of March or mid-April to vaccinate around 70% of our population. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any question.
Thank you so much. If you can please stop sharing your view, your okay, so
here we are. I'm back with you.
Okay, thank you again. This is it was very. There was a lot of information, and I know there are a lot of questions that people want to ask. We'll try to do it in an ordinary manner. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll unmute you. If you can also send through chat, since you don't have much time, I'll prioritize the people that are with the cameras on. So just basically raise your hand. And I see Paul. Sorry, Paul. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. Hi, assuming you can hear me, I'm Paul Cullen. I'm the health editor of the Irish Times newspaper and website in Ireland. Thank you very much for your presentations. A lot of interest in your achievements, obviously here and in other countries. Two quick questions. The two criticisms I hear most often about your achievements are, one, that you paid more money for your vaccines than other countries. Maybe you might talk about that. And the other one you just touched on briefly there, sometimes you're accused of not making sufficient efforts to vaccinate the Arab population. So if you could deal with those two things, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Okay. Regarding the first question, I don't know exactly how much Ireland had paid or going to pay as part of the European Union agreement. As you know, these companies tend to keep this information confidential. We did have a tough commercial discussion, and we paid the best price we were able to get. Whether it's higher than others or it's similar to others, we don't have the exact number. I heard these rumors. I do believe that we may pay a bit more than you have paid, as you had the huge power of the whole European Union, and we are a small country, a small market. So it seems to be that our usually commercial terms are less, I would say, favorable as yours. But just to mention that this understanding that is important to everybody, also for non-wealthy countries, that the price of vaccines are so ridiculously low in comparison to the terrible economical damage of every day of a national closure, that I think that this argument is nuisance. We have to find a way how to vaccinate the whole world. We would not get rid of this terrible pandemic without vaccinating every society and every community in the world. And all of us should do the best of taking it. Whether we could pay less, I wish we could, but we paid the minimum we were able to pay. Now, regarding the second question, when we are talking about Arab Israelis, meaning citizens of Israel, which are Arab, we are putting a tremendous amount of effort. In the sake of time, I would not go into many details, but really we are putting tremendous amount of effort, creating transparency and trust and bringing them. We are basically running a vaccination center in every, I would say even rural center, from the north to the south, even in unrecognized Bedouin villages in the desert of the Negev. And it's a big challenge for us to convince the families to bring the elderly population for vaccination. It's not that we have a perfect way of doing it, but we are really putting tremendous effort. The second question that you were mentioning, I guess, relates to the Palestinian Authority citizens, and that was some criticism from some media. And as it is in the room, I would say it in a very clear way. We have a major interest to see Palestinians being vaccinated as soon as possible. It's important also from the humanitarian and the clinical point of view, and it is extremely important to us as they are our closest neighbors. We have to remember that around 100,000 Palestinians pass each day back and forth the borders between the Palestinian Authority and Israel. And it's quite clear to all of us that it would be impossible to get rid of this pandemic without seeing the Palestinians being vaccinated. Now, at this point, we are vaccinating Israeli citizens. That is basically what each country would do in first. And we, of course, have first to vaccinate our citizens. But at the same time, we are very much aware about a major effort which is done for the Palestinians. And as much as I know, a big contract would be signed with Gamaleya Russia next week, bringing millions of vaccines, and another good contract, large contract of millions of vaccines are also now almost signed or negotiated with AstraZeneca, meaning that the Palestinians in the next few weeks are going to receive a substantial amount of vaccines. Hopefully, I really hope that they would be the first Arabic community to be fully vaccinated in our close region. I do believe that they will be vaccinated before some of European countries.
Thank you, Dr. Shalmon. I'll ask Dana Kraslow.
Thank you so much. Actually, my reporting name, Dana Arshan, and I'm at Fox 5 in New York. And I found it really interesting that you have the single vaccination site where you store everything. But I had two questions. My first one, if you had to sum up in just 20 to 30 seconds about why you think Israel has had so much success in its vaccination campaign compared to other countries, what would you say the main reasons are?
I would mention two reasons. The first one is the fact that we are working as a multi-agency force task, where we are bringing to the table not only the health providers, but rather also the police, the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Defense, the Home Front Command, and many, many other services and agencies. And we play a role where we give, on one hand, we are very centralized, on the other hand, we are giving a lot of responsibility to the HMOs, which are really running the community effort. That is one reason. The second reason, I think it's a combination of good, precise planning, but still keeping up space for flexibility and our ability to be flexible. I'll give you an example for undesired phenomena that we had faced, but we are willing to accept. In a point, people in some HMOs understood that at the end of the day, there would be maybe spare doses of vaccine. So younger people, which were not entitled at that point to be vaccinated, would at the end of the day and would wait. And we allowed them to be vaccinated, and in that sense to reduce the risk of waste, but on the other hand, I think a psychology of supply and demand have been developed. So this psychology was pushing people to rush to be vaccinated in the idea that we have a sufficient amount now, but who knows what could happen in a few weeks. So it's better to get a vaccine now and not to wait.
And my other question, I have a lot of family in this small town, Kiryat Bialik, right outside of Haifa. Mm-hmm. And I was speaking to them yesterday, and they told me they feel like it's been so successful because, so are the HMOs, if you could explain a little to me, they were saying that every family in Israel belongs to different clinics, and they got their text message to their phone directly telling them from their clinic, this is the date that you're going to come and get your shot, and here's the date you're going to come and get your second shot. Can you, is clinic and HMO the same thing? And can you explain a little bit about how the process worked, how they got notified about the first shot, and how they got notified about the second shot? Thank you.
Okay. So as you are a member of this kind of a semi-national, but still competitive system of 4 HMOs that are basically reimbursed by the numbers of members, they have, I would say, the essential need all the time to maintain the current amount of members and to recruit as many as they can from other HMOs. Now we are keeping a very careful game. We are not allowing them to be too competitive. On the other hand, we want this competition to run, to create this type of activities. So some of these HMOs, for instance, were allocating all relevant population and proactively reaching them through text messages, through call messages, through phone calls, and convincing the members to come and be vaccinated. Now, when you hear your local doctor or nurse sending you a message or calling you and asking you to come, it is also giving you some sense of confidence that this vaccine is worthwhile and it is safe.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shalmon. And now we'll move to Ido Vok. Ido, please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Thanks very much. Despite the Israeli name, I am very much not Israeli. I'm international correspondent at The New Statesman from the UK. I have a question about how much thinking there has been on the exit strategy. Israel looks like the first country that is going to achieve, as you said, 70% coverage sometime in March or April. First of all, my first question is it considered feasible to lift restrictions once all the over, I believe, 70s have been vaccinated without the rest? And second of all, how much thinking has there been? Have there been white papers published on the exit strategy? Is there a government plan for an exit strategy?
So for your first question, I don't think we could lift most restriction if only the elderly population is going to be vaccinated. We are certainly going to lift many restrictions as new cases and severe cases drop down. And we see a kind of a national approach where we would have a very wide range of, I would say coverage, not range, coverage of vaccination around the country. Now, I still believe that we would see some restriction for many more months now. But as you understand, I'm now in a relatively total national closure, so we would anyhow start to lift up some of the restriction despite less of vaccination operation in the next 2 weeks. we would gradually again open the education system, we'd open the retail system, we would slowly allow also other sectors to return to activity, but none of these activities are going to be normal in that sense that, for instance, even when we would open gyms and swimming pools and some cultural events, it would be limited in numbers. And again, we would expect people to be very much monitored when they're entering these places, whether they're already vaccinated or had cure or had recovered from COVID or well, at least tested lately. This issue, which would be part of what is known in the world to be the green passport or what else, still is under discussions. Now, regarding white papers of exit strategy, well, unfortunately, we are writing now the third one, as we are now approaching our third exit strategy. I really hope this time it's going to be more successful than the two previous ones.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move to Olga.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for presentation. I'm representing National News Agency of Ukraine, Ukrinform. And I will be very pleased if you comment the information that vaccines against COVID-19 were delivered to Ukraine from Israel illegally, since none of the vaccines are registered in Ukraine. And where in Israel could these vaccines were made, and from where it could be delivered to Ukraine? And the second question, is there commercial available vaccination is in Israel? And are doses of the vaccines persuaded only at state expense? And how citizens of another countries who are legally live in Israel have a vaccination? Thank you very much.
Few complicated questions. Regarding the story with Ukraine, we have only rumors. And I have to say, as much as I could say that our police is investigating into this story, we did not find yet any traces in Israel. So we don't know if it was a real issue of smuggling out vaccines from Israel to the Ukraine, or it was kind of a fraud done internally inside the Ukraine. I do believe that both police authorities of our countries would properly investigate it. If there's something in it to persecute the criminal, because it's, in our understanding, a real serious crime. Now, and as much as I know till now, we don't know how true is this story, but I guess we will find out in the coming future. Regarding commercially availability, no, the answer is not. We do not believe that ethically or practically it is legitimate now to sell for money these vaccines. So everything is paid by the government, and people are entitled to receive vaccine with no payment, and there's not even a way how to pay, as long as they are part of the relevant vaccinated group. Now, regarding legal and illegal foreign citizens living in Israel, we did vaccinate till now mostly foreign workers working into the long-term care industry, and a few other sectors where we thought there's a high risk and it's worthwhile vaccinating also foreign citizens. We are discussing when and how to vaccinate also other people, including asylum seekers and even illegal immigrants. And I do believe that at the end of this operation, everybody which lives permanently in Israel would be vaccinated. We have another phenomena of people which are not living in Israel trying to come and be vaccinated here. It's a big challenge, and we are still looking for the proper means how to tackle this challenge. Leo, are you with us?
Sorry, I was muted. Please, Muhammad, please unmute yourself and present yourself.
Hi, it's Monato Tunji, BBC Arabic in Jerusalem. Thank you for this presentation. I know that you have answered the questions about the Palestinian, but I'm asking specifically about the prisoners, Palestinian, and also the workers that comes through the borders. Do you have any plans to give the vaccine to these people? First of all, the prisoners, secondly, the workers, Palestinians.
Okay, good question. Regarding prisoners, absolutely yes. We had published a white paper saying that all prisoners should be vaccinated immediately by the risk groups. And although there was some political issues with that, I could assure you that we are planning to start vaccinating all prisoners, despite their nationality, from the beginning of next week. Regarding workers in Israel, we did vaccinate all workers in the health sector, Palestinians which are working in Israeli hospitals or other health facilities. Regarding Palestinian workers, let's say at the construction industry, our expectation is that the Palestinian Authority would vaccinate them through the vaccines that hopefully would start to be shipped to the West Bank, maybe even sometime next week.
Thank you, and we'll move. I can't see the name, but it starts with JPN. I think it's from Japan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Asha, for your very informative presentation. When vaccination is conducted at the individual vaccination site, I think there will be a certain amount of extra dose. In such cases, do you inoculate other than priority people, such as elderly and healthcare professionals? Do you have any rules in such cases? That's my question. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I got the point. So if we would have extra vaccines, so who do you ask if we were going to vaccinate?
Because the Pfizer vaccine is required a very ultra freezer, and it maybe the time is very quite limited to vaccinate. That's why if time limitation is very tight, so in such cases, if there is enough people who is priority people, such as elderly and healthcare professionals, do you allow to inoculate the ordinary people, for example, very young people or other than ordinary people?
Yeah. I think I did explain it. I will try again. In the end of the day, when it seems that we have extra doses of vaccine that could be lost, we are calling first responders like policemen, fire brigades, ambulance drivers, paramedics to come in and to be vaccinated, even if they are young individuals with no risk factors. At the same time, as I have mentioned, we do not encourage, but we are not prohibiting a situation where if some doses are really left at the end of the day and young people come and queue, they are entitled to be vaccinated.
Thank you. I know there are a lot of questions in the chat. I'm not sure we have time. We have about 10 more minutes. Please ask a quick question and I'll be with you. Inga, the floor is yours. No, you're muted now. Okay.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. This is Inga Rock for Neue Zürcher Zeitung, Swiss newspaper. Thank you for doing this. Dr. Shalmon, can you provide us some figures about how many people have been vaccinated in the Arab and the ultra-Orthodox community? And what are the reasons why the people are not getting vaccinated? And my second question would be, there's a lot of debate that you are sharing data with Moderna and Pfizer. Could you explain what kind of data you are sharing beside gender, age, and maybe ethnicity? Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to answer two questions. I don't have exact figures for now, but I would tell you that while in the general public, 70% of 60 and above were vaccinated. The numbers in the ultra-Orthodox community was a bit lower, but not substantially lower. The problem was not with the mainstream ultra-Orthodox community, but rather with some small, mostly Hasidic groups which have or less trust or less connection with the state, or somehow have a kind of an anti-vax agenda, which we have it as well as somewhat as the boundaries of the ultra-Orthodox community, as few other communities around the country. And we did went and tried to tackle it using rabbis, but using also other forms of media. Of course, they are not using TV and they are not using internet, not officially at least. So we went in other means to try and convince them. Regarding the Arab population, again, it's a big difference between, I would say, the main Arab towns in the north of the country and the center of the country, and some Bedouin communities in the desert. We found it more difficult. Numbers were much lower there, and we, at least for the last week, putting a lot of effort into massive public diplomacy in these villages. I don't think it's I don't know what is the reason for that, but I guess it's something that people maybe have less trust in authorities or have less trust in issues like big companies or whatever. And in that sense, I think the only way is to really be honest and transparent and convince people that that is exactly the right thing to do now. And of course, vaccine has their own risk and adverse events really happen. It's not a myth. We do deal with adverse events, but when we put an account the risk of severe adverse events versus the risk of the disease, it seems that this vaccine is extremely safe. Now, your second question was of our data sharing, which was published. We do not have anything with Moderna yet about it, but with Pfizer, certainly, we agreed to share the data. It's not personal data, it's the general data, mostly adverse events, and in the future also efficacy, meaning if we did have cases of infections after a full vaccination. This is a kind of a post-marketing, I would say, study, which is very common, what is called phase 4 trials by the pharmaceutical world, meaning post-marketing trials. And in that sense, I think both we could gain a lot by having this cooperation, and I think Pfizer as a company, but the world in general, if this data would be shared with other countries, could be very valuable in the sense of really understanding the full extent of adverse events of these vaccines, and also get information about the efficacy, the real efficacy, not only the phase 3 efficacy, which as we know was accelerated phase 3, but in real life, in real people, in real scenario, what is the efficacy of these vaccines.
Thank you. Ana Portella.
Hello, thank you very much. Ana Portella from La Lista, Mexico. I would like to ask you, you mentioned that the Pfizer vaccine is quite sensitive. Can you please give us more details? Because, you know, Mexican geography is quite irregular, so I think that would be interesting for us to know. Can you please also spell out the amount of vaccines you have been receiving and how many, deliveries have you had from them? And if you have any plan to vaccinate your citizens living abroad, please. Thank you very much.
All great questions. I'm not sure I have all the exact numbers, but till now we have received around 5 million doses in general. We are going to receive this weekend another shipment, so it will be around 5 million doses in general. It should be enough for 2.5 million citizens at this point. We are expecting to get on a weekly basis extra deliveries from Pfizer and as well from Moderna. Moderna just had started to ship to Israel. And our plan is to be able to vaccinate around 70% of the population till April. Would that work? It's early to say. I think the enthusiasm of the public to come at this point, where the psychology that I was talking about of supply and demand is very strong. So when that would be diminished, and it would inevitably would happen in a few weeks, we would have a big challenge now to convince the other parts of population, which are less anxious to come and more hesitant to come and be vaccinated. So that may take time, and I hope we'll be successful with that. Regarding with citizens living abroad, it was a big issue for us. We had a debate this week. We decided at this point we are officially only vaccinating people who has a right for being a member in HMO. Now, if you do not live in Israel, but you kept your HMO rights by paying an annual tax, you are entitled to get it. If you just left a few months ago, a year ago, you are still being considered to be insured. But if you are out of the country now for 15 or 20 years, we are not going to vaccinate you now, at least as long as we are not sure that we'll have enough vaccines for people which are really living in the country in the state of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shalmon. I don't know if you have time for one more question.
I think
we have a lot of
one more. Yeah.
One more. So I'll Francisca. I'm really sorry for the rest of you. We wanted to ask. We have at least 20 more people in the list, but I'm not sure we'll have time for that. Francisca, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm Francisca from Bio Chile. You just mentioned in your presentation about the target media campaign for the population who are oppositors or in fear of the vaccination plan. Could you briefly explain what the campaign is about and what recommendations would you give to other countries who are dealing with this issue?
Which complaints?
Sorry?
The campaigns about the people who are afraid from the vaccination.
Ah, you mean campaign. So I guess, well, we have many campaigns. Campaigns for the elderly population, campaigns for the Orthodox community, campaign for young people. Each campaign has a different mentality and a different approach. Now, I think the mutual issue, the mutual aspect of all campaign is a combination of being honest and transparent, not saying that everything is fantastic and there's no risk of side effect, and at the same time to be very much clear about the efficacy and about the advantage of being vaccinated, both for yourself as an individual as well as for your surrounding family members and community. And in that sense, I think we would have a great deal of a need for a specific campaign for the young population when we are going to vaccinate them. And again, at this point, don't forget that we are not vaccinating children, not up below the age of 16. So in a point where we would have enough data to license these vaccines for children, and we will have the decision to start vaccinating children, that would be a whole different vaccine, because you know the common knowledge is that children usually are more resistant to COVID-19, and if they do encounter the infections, it usually would be a very limited and easy cold, flu-like disease at the most, and why should you vaccinate your child if that is a story? And that is a big challenge for all of us. I am not sure I have a full scheme of how are we going to really campaign it, but we would certainly have to convince parents to vaccinate their children, both for their own safety, as we do know that in rare cases, children do develop severe forms of reaction to COVID-19, even sometimes lethal reactions to COVID-19, like Kawasaki-like disease and other cardiac infections and other major problems. And at the same time, explain that without vaccinating the children, we would not be able to eradicate this pandemic. I do believe that the level of vaccination among children will be much lower than we see now, but we will do our best.
Thank you so much for your time. There was one quick question. Are pregnant women being vaccinated in Israel? Maybe you can answer that.
Okay, I could take two more questions. I think I still have time till 5.
Okay. So thank you.
Regarding
so we'll take
pregnant
one from
women, we do not have any positive data to reject vaccination of pregnant women, but we do not have sufficient data to say it is fully safe. So our formal recommendation is that a pregnant woman must consult her personal gynecologist and take in account and measure in account the risk and the benefit of being vaccinated as she's pregnant. If a woman hopes to be vaccinated, we do vaccinate pregnant women.
Okay, there's someone by the name of Maganotic. I can't see your full name, but
Yes. Hello, my name is my name is Daniel Silva. I'm a journalist from Chile, from Mega Noticias. That's the way to pronounce it, that name. Doctor, thank you for your presentation. Two concepts, just two definitions maybe. I don't quite fully understand the HMO concept figure. That's one. The two, the pizza slide strategy, I didn't also get that. And the third one is, is there been any country from South America that come to you, like approach to you to ask for advice?
I would start, I will try to answer those three questions. So the first question was our HMO system. That is a long lecture of at least 1 hour, but in general, the HMOs are the health provider to the public. Mm-hmm. So everybody is insured through HMOs. So you must be a member of one of the 4 HMOs, and as I said, you are allowed to switch HMO. Now, HMO take care of your primary health care, usually with their employee doctors in your community, and in every community you have clinics. And they would be also responsible for any reimbursement of treatments, of medications. If you are hospitalized, despite where you are, they will pay the bill. And they basically are in charge of delivering all basket of services. The national basket scheme of health are fully covered, is fully covered by the HMOs. Regarding the pizza tray is a way to diminish vibration of the defreeze vials. As I said, because it's a liposomal solution, never mind what it means, the chemical issue. Vibration is very harmful for this solution and could destabilize it. So you use this pizza tray to limit and to diminish the amount of vibration that these vials are going through. Last question was regarding South American countries. So I did speak with Argentina, Chile, Peru, Brazil, Costa Rica, and I guess a few more about our program. Yes, I did.
Do we have time for one more?
Yes.
Pepe?
Thank you. This is José Carreño with Diario de México. My question is very easy, very fast. What is the percentage of Israeli-made vaccines that are being applied? A few months ago, there was a big announcement from Israel about about research and eventual production of Israeli vaccines. So I would like to ask, what is the percentage of that vaccine that is being applied in Israel, and if eventually will be ready to be exported?
Okay. That's a great question to end our conference today. So Israel has one successful approach by the Israeli Biological Research Institute, and it's a vesicular virus vehicle vaccine, which will be a single dose and seems to be very effective. Unfortunately, it's only now in the middle of the second phase of the clinical trial, meaning that we are expecting it to pass phase 3 only sometime at the beginning of the summer. So we are already discussing the production of it, but I think it will be available in the market, not before the end of the summer. So for your first question, no, we are not vaccinating out of clinical trials yet. Whether it will be available both for the local market as well as the international market, I do believe it is going to be there sometime in the second half of this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. I know you're very busy. You can go. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. I see there are a lot more questions. I'm very sorry we didn't get to everyone. What I can tell you a few more things. First of all, we'll consider doing another session like this next week. It depends on the agenda of Dr. Shalmon. I think that there's a lot of interest in that issue. If you do have further questions, you can send it to your consulate or embassy, and they'll send it to us, and we'll try to answer that through the embassies and consulate directly to you. We are recording this session. You can all get this recording through the embassies and consulate. We'll send them hopefully later on today or tomorrow morning, so you can you'll be able to use this recording. As the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that we are cooperating very closely with the Ministry of Health and with the other authorities that Dr. Shalmon mentioned. One of the ways we have been cooperating is that we, as diplomats, approached the companies, both Pfizer and Moderna and others, early stage to create to start their interaction and the negotiation, and we are very glad to be part of this system that allowed Israel to be one of the first countries to have received the vaccination. That's it for me. Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully, we'll see you soon in our next international press conferences, and obviously here in Israel after the coronavirus crisis will be over. Keep safe, keep healthy, and goodbye from Jerusalem.